Cleric started questioning the patterns of his own life, the chaos, the manipulation, the constant need to conciliate Sheila to avoid her wrath. He'd induced himself that staying near to her kept him safe. But the verity was harder. Staying close kept him trapped. And Deacon Sharp, for all his once miscalculations, had no way truly been a sissy. He'd survived captivity, reproach, treason, and heartache. Fear was no longer commodity he was willing to make a future around. Meanwhile, Taylor Hayes had been navigating her own emotional maze. As a famed psychiatrist and mama to Steffi and Thomas, Taylor had spent decades helping others defy their trauma. But she herself was no foreigner to complicated connections, especially when it came to Sheila. Taylor understood better than utmost the cerebral grip Sheila wielded over people. She honored manipulation when she saw it. And she began to notice commodity different in Cleric clarity. Their exchanges started innocently enough. Taylor stopped by Illinois Giardino under the guise of agitating hope and the ongoing family pressures. But beneath the face, there was commodity deeper forming. A collective respect erected not on chaos, but on honesty. Deacon surprised Taylor with his vulnerability. He admitted that for too long he'd allowed fear to mandate his fidelity. He admitted he'd confused drama with passion. And utmost surprisingly of all, he admitted that he was done being hysterical of Sheila. Taylor studied him precisely the night he said it. "You doen't sound hysterical," she observed still. "I'm not," Deacon replied, his voice steady in a way she had no way heard before. "Sheila doesn't get to run my life presently." That protestation wasn't just bravado. It was emancipation. As Sheila continued weaving her usual web, trying to test Deacon's devotion, intimating at consequences, reminding him of their participated history, she tasted his distance. He no longer squinched at her sharp tone. He no longer rushed to assure her. And when she brazened him about it, awaiting submission, she set up defiance rather. "I watch about you," Deacon told her forcefully. "But I won't live in fear of you." Those words landed like a poke. Sheila had erected her power on intimidation. And without fear, her influence weakened. What she didn't anticipate, what no bone anticipated, was that Deacon's newfound confidence would draw him closer to Taylor. One evening, after an especially tense battle with Sheila at the eatery, Deacon called Taylor. His voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't hopeless. It was bent. "I need you to see commodity," he said. Taylor dithered. She knew the optics were dangerous. She knew Sheila's covetousness could enkindle without warning. But she also tasted that this moment signified, not romantically, but symbolically. When Taylor arrived at Deacon's apartment above Illinois Giardino, she was prepared for drama. What she set up rather was calm determination. Cleric led her outside, not furtively, not shamefully, but openly. "I'm not hiding presently," he said. The weight of that statement dallied in the room. For Cleric, bringing Taylor into his particular space, into his bedroom, wasn't about reproach. It wasn't about temptation. It was about reclaiming home that had formerly felt dominated by fear. That room had witnessed numerous arguments with Sheila, rumored pitfalls, emotional manipulation. It had been a battlefield of power dynamics. And now, Deacon wanted to strip it of that history. Taylor understood incontinently. As a psychiatrist, she honored the emblematic act. Exposure remedy. Reclaiming trauma spots. Facing fear head-on. "You're defying it," she said vocally. "Yes," he replied. "With someone who doesn't use fear as our armament." Their propinquity was charged, but not in a reckless way. It was charged with trust. With the pressure of two grown-ups who understood boundaries yet felt the inarguable pull of connection. Deacon had spent times entangled in poisonous cycles. Taylor had spent times healing from them. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. When Sheila inescapably learned that Taylor had been there, in Deacon's bedroom, no lower, the explosion was nippy. Sheila stormed into Illinois Giardino the coming day, fury blazing in her eyes. She indicted. She hovered. She tried to revitalize the old dynamic of intimidation. But Cleric didn't blench. "I won't be spooked into loving you," he told her calmly. Sheila's voice shook with rage. "You suppose she's better than me?" "No," Deacon said unevenly. "I suppose she's healthier for me." That distinction cut deeper than any personality. Across city, Steffi Forrester was stunned to hear whispers of Taylor's visit. Defensive instincts surged. She bothered her mama was stepping into peril. Yet when she brazened Taylor, she set up not recklessness, but clarity. I'm not delivering him, Taylor explained. He's delivering himself. And that was the verity. Deacon's metamorphosis wasn't about choosing one woman over another. It was about choosing courage over fear. Still, feelings ran grandly. Rich Forrester raised an eyebrow at the news. Brooke Logan set up herself uncomfortably intrigued. Indeed, Hope plodded with the counter-accusations. Deacon's life had always gurgled outward, affecting everyone connected to him. The pressure between Sheila and Taylor escalated, but not in the explosive way observers might anticipate. Rather of violence, there was cerebral warfare. Sheila tried to bait Taylor into battle. Taylor refused. She maintained countenance, understanding that response fed Sheila's need for chaos. The true battle was inside Deacon. Late one night, alone in his bedroom, the same room that had come emblematic of his turning point, Cleric reflected on how far he'd come. Fear had formally mandated his every twinkle when Sheila's name appeared on his phone. Now, he felt commodity strange peace. When Taylor visited again, the atmosphere was different. Softer. Safer. They talked for hours, about alternate chances, about the patterns people repeat when they don't feel good of stability. Taylor challenged him gently, asking whether his frippery would hold if Sheila escalated. It will, Deacon said. Because this isn't about her presently. Their closeness strengthened, not with reckless passion but with emotional closeness. Cleric wasn't trying to provoke Sheila. He wasn't trying to impress Taylor. He was trying to review himself. Outside forces continued to swirl. Sheila colluded ways to recapture control. Steffi kept a vigilant eye. Brooke suspected about shifting alliances. Yet the core of the story remained simple and important. A man formerly ruled by fear had decided to stand up. In classic The Bold and the Beautiful fashion, the plot balanced peril with metamorphosis. Would Sheila accept losing her hold over Cleric? Unlikely. Would Taylor remain vulnerable to the chaos that sounded to follow him? That remained to be seen. But one verity was inarguable: when Deacon brought Taylor into his bedroom, it wasn't an act of reproach, it was a protestation of independence. He was no longer hiding, no longer pulsing, no longer living under the trouble of emotional retribution. And in Los Angeles, where love and power frequently intertwine in dangerous ways, that choice changed everything. The coming time Sheila appeared at Illinois Giardino, she carried herself with an unsettling calm. That alone made the situation more unpredictable. When Sheila was loud, people braced for chaos. When she was quiet, it meant computation. She approached Deacon sluggishly, studying his face as though searching for cracks in his resoluteness. I hear you've been amusing guests, she said smoothly, though her eyes burned. Cleric didn't look down. That was new. In the history, indeed, the hint of battle would make him protective. Now, he simply wiped down the bar and answered unevenly. I don't need your authorization to have someone over. The simplicity of that statement hit harder than any cried argument ever could. Sheila lifted her head. Taylor Hayes in your bedroom isn't just someone. You suppose she understands you? You suppose she won't judge you? For a split second, old precariousness flitted across Deacon's expression. Sheila knew exactly where to aim, at his shame, his history, his felonious record, the miscalculations that visited him. But rather of retreating, he stepped closer. She sees me, he replied. Not what I've done. Not what you remind me of when you're angry. She sees who I'm trying to come. That answer shook Sheila further than she let on. Across city, Taylor sat in her living room replaying her last visit to Deacon's apartment. She hadn't crossed any professional lines, she was careful about that. But she couldn't deny that commodity emotional had shifted. Watching Cleric stand up to Sheila without recoiling had stirred commodity deeply mortal in her. Not romantic fantasy. Not reckless magnet. Respect. Steffi noticed it incontinently. You're invested, Steffi said gently, concern laced in her voice. I'm hopeful, Taylor corrected. And that distinction signified. Taylor wasn't naive. She knew Sheila's history. She understood the peril of provoking someone who thrived on insecurity. But she also believed in cerebral growth, and Cleric was flaunting commodity real. For the first time, he wasn't replying to fear. He was acting from conviction. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the Forrester and Logan circles. Brooke was the first to raise an eyebrow at the situation. She knew Deacon privately, his charm, his freakishness, his tendency to fall into complicated snares. The idea of him choosing Taylor felt both shocking and strangely logical. Ridge, ever defensive of Taylor, approached Deacon directly. Still, Ridge advised, his tone controlled but establishment, if you're using her to get back at Sheila. Cleric didn't take the bait. This isn't about vengeance, he said calmly. It's about peace. Ridge studied him precisely. He anticipated God. Rather, he saw clarity. It unsettled him nearly as important as it comforted him. But Sheila wasn't a woman who surrendered home still. That evening, she let herself into Deacon's apartment unannounced, a habit born from times of blurred boundaries. She anticipated to find him alone, maybe miscarrying, maybe disaccorded. Rather, she set up Taylor sitting comfortably at the small kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between them. The air thickened incontinently. Sheila, Taylor saluted politely, her tone measured. For a moment, the room felt like a cerebral chessboard. Sheila scrutinized the space, the bed neatly made, the atmosphere calm. This wasn't a secret meeting. This wasn't a treason passing in murk. It was open. Purposeful. You're bold, Sheila said vocally, though venom coddled beneath her countenance. No, Taylor replied. I'm honest. Cleric stepped between them, not physically shielding either woman, but emotionally staking his ground. You do'n't get to blackjack her, he told Sheila forcefully. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to Sheila that way in front of someone differently. Sheila's mask cracked. You suppose she won't leave when effects get messy, she snapped. They always do, Deacon. Taylor stood, meeting Sheila's aspect. Without aggression. People leave when there's manipulation and fear. When those vanish, occasionally they stay. That was the core verity Sheila couldn't tolerate. Her power reckoned on emotional reliance. And Deacon was ramifying it. After Sheila stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls, silence filled the apartment. Cleric exhaled sluggishly. I used to live staying for that sound, he admitted. The slam. The explosion. The trouble. And now? Taylor asked. Now I feel free. Their eyes met, not with reckless heat, but with participated understanding. Healing wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, purposeful, occasionally quiet. Yet this was the bold and the beautiful. Quiet metamorphoses infrequently stayed quiet for long. Sheila's coming move was subtle but dangerous. Rather of defying Cleric directly again, she began planting seeds away. She suggested to Hope that Taylor might be manipulating her father emotionally. She suggested to Steffi that Deacon's history would inescapably resurface. She worked to insulate him socially, hoping mistrustfulness would creep back by. But commodity unanticipated happened. People began noticing the difference. Hope saw her father handle conflict without guard. Steffi observed that Taylor wasn't being pulled into chaos, she was setting boundaries. Indeed, Brooke reluctantly admitted that Deacon sounded steady. The bedroom that had formerly represented secretiveness and volatility came commodity additional entirely. It came a space of honest discussion. Of responsibility. Cleric and Taylor spent hours there not in reckless passion, but in reflection, agitating triggers, patterns, emotional responsibility. Fear kept you attached, Taylor explained one evening. But courage will determine who stays. Cleric jounced. I'm done confusing intensity with love. Outside, Sheila watched her influence weaken, and that alarmed her further than rage ever could. She had always thrived when others replied to her. But now, Cleric wasn't replying. He was choosing. In a final attempt to recapture control, Sheila brazened him intimately at Illinois Giardino during peak regale hours. You suppose you've outgrown me? She demanded loudly. The entire eatery fell silent. Cleric stepped out from behind the bar, meeting her aspect. Calmly. I've outgrown being hysterical. The statement echoed. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dramatic. It was final. Sheila searched his face for vacillation, for the flicker of reliance she formerly reckoned on. She set up none. And in that moment, the power dynamic truly shifted. Latterly that night, as Deacon closed up the eatery and returned upstairs, Taylor was staying. Not as a deliverer. Not as a rescuer. Simply as someone who believed growth was possible. You didn't raise your voice, she observed. I didn't need to, he replied. He understood now that strength wasn't loud. It wasn't reactive. It was harmonious. Bringing Taylor into his bedroom had started as an emblematic act of defiance. But it had evolved into commodity deeper, a recovery of tone worth. That room no longer carried echoes of intimidation. It carried discussion, choice, responsibility. Of course, this was far from the end. Sheila was changeable. The once no way dissolved entirely in Los Angeles. But Deacon had crossed an unnoticeable threshold. He no longer measured his opinions by how angry Sheila might come. For the first time in times, his life wasn't ringing around her. And in the intricate, emotionally charged world of the bold and the beautiful, that kind of metamorphosis was more explosive than any poke, treason, or shocking concession. Because fear had eventually lost its grip. But this time, mistrustfulness didn't win. Rather of replaying Sheila's pitfalls in his mind, Cleric replayed commodity differently, Taylor's steady voice reminding him that fear only has power when it's fed. He'd spent times feeding it, attributing it, excusing it, indeed idealizing it. Now, he was starving it. Taylor, for her part, remained conservative. She understood that growth wasn't direct. One stalwart moment didn't abolish times of poisonous exertion. But what impressed her most was Deacon's thickness. He wasn't grandstanding. He wasn't performing strength for applause. He was living it still. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Los Angeles skyline, Taylor returned to Deacon's apartment. The atmosphere was different now, lighter. There was no pressure in the air, no expectation of interruption. The bedroom door remained open, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a symbol. Nothing retired, nothing uncommunicative. I anticipated counterreaction, Deacon admitted as they sat across from one another. I anticipated to second-guess myself. And Taylor urged gently. I didn't. That simple verity spoke volumes. Across city, Sheila was unraveling not in explosive chaos, but in commodity more dangerous preoccupation. Losing control over Cleric wasn't just about losing a mate. It was about losing dominance. She had always believed that emotional influence was her topmost armament. Watching it dissolve was intolerable. She began showing up suddenly again, but this time, she was met with boundaries. When she appeared at the apartment door unannounced, Cleric didn't argue. He didn't conciliate. He didn't negotiate. You need to call before coming then, he said forcefully. The audacity of the boundary stunned her. You no way inclined before, Sheila replied coldly. I mind now. 3 words. Calm. Unapologetic. For Sheila, that calmness was infuriating. She preferred chaos. It gave her commodity to push against. But Deacon's immutability offered no entry point. Meanwhile, Taylor faced her own scrutiny. Rich questioned whether she was putting herself in emotional peril. Brooke wondered if old battles would resurface. Indeed, Steffi bothered that propinquity to Sheila, indeed laterally, could helical into commodity changeable. Taylor heeded to all of it. But she also trusted her instincts. I'm not walking into dysfunction, she explained to Steffi one autumn. I'm witnessing someone step out of it. Steffi wanted to argue. She wanted to cover her mama. But she couldn't deny the substantiation. Cleric wasn't chasing drama. He wasn't provoking Sheila. He wasn't leaning on Taylor as a guard. He was standing singly. The bedroom, formerly an emblematic battlefield, had converted into a space of vulnerability and verity. Deacon admitted regrets there. He spoke about how fear had distorted his sense of fidelity. He conceded the times he stayed with Sheila because leaving felt more dangerous than enduring. I allowed. Surviving was the same as living, he confessed one night. Taylor reached for his hand, not romantically, but reassuringly. It's not. That distinction signified. And yet, no metamorphosis on the bold and the beautiful remains unchallenged for long. Sheila, growing hopeless, tried a different tactic: emotional appeal. She possessed Deacon outside Illinois Giardino one evening, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "You're rewriting history," she said still. "We had commodity real." Cleric broke. He didn't deny the history. That would have been too easy.